Hello, my name is Blossoms, and welcome to another Genshin Impact video. And today I'm going to be showing you guys my Xinyan support build and going over that. Now, I do want to say I do plan to do a Xinyan main DPS or sub DPS build guide as well. However, I wanted to split those videos as I think the information all in one video would just be a little much because Xinyan can be a kind of a complicated character with her kit. So I did decide to go ahead and split those up. But anyway, I love this rockstar and I'm super excited to show you guys my support build. So first and foremost, let's go over her talents here. I have 5, 9, and 6 on her talents. That is because, yes, I do have her at C3, so that is important to know. I will talk about those constellations in just a moment. However, we will briefly go over the K here. Do remember her E skill here has a relatively decent cooldown, and the way it functions is you press E, you do a swath of pyro damage, and based on however many enemies you hit, you get a different level shield, and on the final level of the shield, you get a pyro damage over time effect, which is really awesome and persists throughout the shield's duration. I also wanted to mention that the shield scales off defense, and I will get into the fact that the defense part doesn't really matter too much. If you focus on defense, it will be a stronger shield, don't get me wrong, but it won't be like a strong shield, at least compared to some of the other shield characters we have in the game. I would focus more on the damage over time aspect of the shield rather than the protection aspect. Yes, this can take a hit or two, but even if you go full on defense, it's still only going to take a hit or two in most situations. So that is something important to note, and I will talk a little bit about it more in the actual artifact section. And then moving on, we have our Elemental Burst Rift Revolution. Basically just does a huge AoE attack that initially does physical damage and then proceeds to do a bunch of pyro numbers. It looks super flashy and I love it. And this is important because it has relatively low energy cost and a decent cooldown here, so you are going to be able to get it quite regularly. Then as for passives, this one basically just makes it to where you need to hit less enemies to get the max level shield. And then this one is while you are in that shield, whoever's in the shield at the moment gets an increase to their physical damage by 15%, which is also important to notice because this does apply to her as well. So if you have the shield up, then your Rift Revolution's initial damage is going to do more. And then briefly talking about the constellations here, I do want to say I don't think support Xinyan, at least in my opinion, is too worth it without C2, as C2 here basically it makes it to where the physical aspect of your elemental burst has 100% crit rate, which is nice, but the most important part is that your elemental burst also gives you the maximum shield level, which is going to give you that pyro damage over time, and it is extremely nice. It is the reason I wanted to build support Xinyan, as her E there, making sure you have opponents grouped up to go ahead and get the pyro damage over time can be a little annoying sometimes. And if you're fighting a single opponent, then you're never going to get the pyro damage over time, and I just don't really like that consistency as much. But when you have this, you can guarantee yourself that maximum level shield that's going to give you that damage over time, and then that way you're going to ensure that you're going to be doing that pyro damage. The first one here is something that is more for her sub DPS and or main DPS role, so that is a very good one as well, but not important for the support role here. And then the Constellation 4 is actually amazing for her support role here, as it's going to decrease your opponent's physical resistance by 15%, so that is worth noting as well. And then the C6 here isn't very worth it at all, really. I'm like, it does some wonky stuff with the charge attack there that's pretty funny, but it doesn't really matter that much. And then moving on to the artifacts here, what I've decided to do is I've decided to go full into the Elemental Burst since I have Constellation 2. So I went 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry and 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. And I will say I don't think this is exactly a finalized thing for her, the support aspect for her. You definitely have a lot of options, as you could go 2-piece Gladiator, you could go 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry, and that would work for both support and main DPS or like a sub DPS role. Or you could do something to where you kind of split up some of the damage bonus, where you get the 2-piece pyro damage bonus and then the 2-piece for the physical damage bonus. That is also worth noting, as then that way your E's and your Q are just going to be both dealing that more damage. However, I think you are pretty much locked into needing that 2-piece Bloodstained Chivalry, as that physical damage bonus is just really, really nice. However, you could also opt for something like a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. I think personally this is probably the best one for me, although I do really want to test the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige as well, just to kind of see how that melds with the team. As for the stats here, I did go attack percent here. And as I mentioned before, the defense percent really just isn't worth it. I put on something like White Blind and a defense percent Sands on her earlier, and then tried to test out just how strong the shield was, and it still really wasn't that strong. So I really personally wouldn't go for defense percent on Xinyan, at least on the main stats. However, I do recommend you go for it for some of her substats. Her substats, you're really going to want things like crit rate and crit damage, quite obviously, as every character wants that, but you're also probably going to want things like defense percent, attack percent, and then you're definitely going to want some energy recharge, as the more energy recharge, the more you're going to be getting that elemental burst, which is extremely valuable. Then for the goblet here, I went with physical damage bonus. However, you could easily go for something like pyro damage bonus. Both are going to benefit you pretty darn well. I tested out the difference between the pyro damage bonus and the physical damage bonus here, and they seemed to essentially compensate for each other. The pyro damage is a little bit more prevalent in her kit, at least with the ease and the pyro damage over time, so that might be something you want to go with. However, I would basically just choose whichever one you have good subsets on, and as you can see, my physical damage bonus cup here is really good for Xinyan with the defense percent, attack percent, crit rate, and crit damage. So this is pretty ideal for her, which is why I went with physical damage bonus. But if you have a good pyro damage bonus goblet, then I would honestly probably go for that one, as it's going to accentuate her kit just as well. And then for the actual helmet here, I went with crit damage because I do have that C2. However, if you don't have C2, then I would recommend probably going for crit rate, as you are going to want your numbers to crit as much as you can, especially the damage over time, especially all of the ticks on her elemental burst for the pyro. Those of you going with the pyro damage goblet, you're 100% going to want crit rate, because there are so many ticks in there. You're going to want to make sure they all crit, and then you're going to want to focus on more on that crit damage substats. But you see here, I got the crit damage element with good crit rate here, good energy recharge, and really good defense percent. So this is a really good Xinyan artifact as well, and fits the support role really well. As for weapons for Xinyan, if you're doing support Xinyan, then I gotta say I think Sacrificial Greatsword is probably going to be the best option. Something like the Skyward Sword, I believe, with the energy recharge substat is also a really good option. So if you have that 5-star, then that's probably going to overall be a better option, just because it's going to be giving you those raw stats on top of having energy recharge as a substat. The most important part is the energy recharge aspect, and those of you might be asking, well, why can't I use Favonius Greatsword as a much higher energy recharge substat? I think Sacrificial Greatsword is going to benefit you a lot more, as when it does reset your cooldown there, you're going to be able to get off another E, which is going to generate more energy overall for you. One more thing I do want to note here is, say maybe you accidentally mess up your E and you only hit one opponent instead of two, then oftentimes you get a second chance to go ahead and do your E again, and then get the pyro damage over time. Because yes, whenever you cast her E, the new shield will replace the old shield. That is important to know, especially if you have the C2. So if you do the Q and then you do the E on a single target, you're going to lose your damage over time bubble. So that is very important to note. However, just going over, weapons for support Xinyan, I gotta say Sacrificial Greatsword is probably my best in slot option for the 4-star category. Other things like White Blind are pretty solid. Yes, it does buff up your shield, but as we did mention before, it doesn't buff it up too much. However, this does increase your attack and defense as you do some normal attacks. This is also a pretty good sub DPS option. However, I don't think it's the best support option. I think your two best 4-star support options are definitely Sacrificial Greatsword and Favonius Greatsword, as the energy recharge subset is going to help you out a lot. And now for the main attributes of Xinyan. Yes, I have her at level 69 because I'm cool like that. And then I got 1500 attack, almost 800 defense here. A little decent elemental mastery. I wasn't really shooting for it, but we got there. And then I've got some pretty solid crit rate at almost 40%, and then really good crit damage at 153%, because I was focusing more on crit damage so I could make sure her elemental burst was dealing more damage, as I mentioned before. And then I have 152% energy recharge, and this is a solid amount to have. Obviously more is going to be better for support Xinyan, but I would at least shoot for that 150% range, as that's going to help you out a ton. And then you see my damage bonus here on the physical damage bonus is just the 73%, which is nice. And then no damage bonus on the actual pyro there. I might try out the 2-piece pyro set with the 2-piece bloodstain, just kind of see how that goes. But for now, I'm really liking my artifact sets, as the substats just really line up for my Xinyan. And I think that's a little bit more important than some of the actual set bonuses, and that's something you definitely want to keep in mind. Alright, enough of the talking, I know. Let's go ahead and show off some gameplay of support Xinyan. I'll go ahead and show her off in the open world a little bit, just so you guys have a vibe of how she works there. And I'll be pairing her with somebody like Zhao, who's just going to be doing all the swirls and stuff. So that's going to be pretty fun. And then we can also try to show her off on a boss or Spiral Abyss or something. I don't know, we'll see where it takes us. Alright, starting off here, destroying some hill turtle towers. And I messed up the initial one there, but that's okay because we just got our Q. You see that does some really solid physical damage, and then now Zhao has the buff and is able to spread some of that pyro, which is really darn nice, as well as do some increased physical damage, so I don't really need him to be in his ult or anything. And that's pretty darn nice, but you do see our shield is gone, but since we have the sacrificial sword, it is back already. But we did lose our pyro damage over time there, so that's something you definitely want to manage. And it's very important to note that you don't really need the E to have the pyro damage over time. Yes, it is nice, and yes, I think it is worth it, but it's a little bit more important to make sure that you're getting that E off, just for the pyro application and the actual damage it deals. Alright, swooping on in on some more hill turtles here. As you can see, I'm trying to get some of my daily commissions done here at the same time, which is pretty nice. And I did want to mention, I have tested out the actual pyro damage cup, and as I mentioned before, the physical damage and the actual pyro damage do seem to essentially make up for one another, and it's just going to be more up to you. I'd say if you have C2, go for physical damage bonus, but if you don't, then go for pyro damage bonus if you're dead set on your support Xinyan. And you know, it is a build video, so of course we are going to bully the pyro Registine as usual, just so you guys get an idea of how she could be of use in a boss fight. And this is kind of one of the scenarios I was talking about where I think she becomes really worth it at C2, because obviously we're not going to be able to get her pyro damage over time on a single enemy here. And as you can see here, she's allowing us to get some really solid reactions on top of the fact that we're getting things like melt and swirl going on. That pyro damage over time is extremely valuable, and I wouldn't really worry about the fact that the pyro damage over time itself doesn't do that huge damage. It's more the fact that it applies the pyro, so then that way you can get the reactions with somebody like Ganyu or somebody like Xingqiu, who is going to be doing the damage portion where their one hits are going to actually deal considerable damage. Alright, and we'll even go ahead and test her out here a little bit in some early Spiral Abyss, give you guys an idea how strong she can actually be here. And she is dealing a little bit more damage, by the way, because we do have dual pyro resonance right now, so do keep that in mind. Because I wanted Bennett here instead of Ganyu, because Ganyu doesn't really help that much on this floor. But you can see she's helping us deal some really solid damage here. And you see that that physical part really starts to deal some strong damage, especially if you pair it in something like Bennett's ult there, or with another pyro unit where you are getting that that extra attack bonus. And you see we're barely even using our actual DPS here. This is just support Xinyan basically ruling the field right now. Helping us get these reactions that we wanted. You saw we just got a melt there on that cryo slime shield, helping us facilitate, you know, getting rid of that. So you can see how her support aspect can be really darn useful, and I think it really shines once you start, getting that C2. Now I think that's about what I want to cover with the support Xinyan build guide here. She's a really solid support, and when you've got her built with something like the Sacrificial Greatsword and you have C2, she really comes alive as a support. Making sure that you have that pyro damage over the time, even when you don't have more than one enemy, is extremely nice. And she is one of my favorite pairings with Zhao along with Xing Shou. So if you guys live in Zhao or something like that, or you have a physical main DPS, then I would highly recommend Xinyan for your team. Anyway, as I said, I will be doing the actual main DPS Xinyan before too long. I think I gotta get some of the artifacts up, and then I'll go ahead and show that off as well. But other than that, that's gonna be it for me. My name's Blossoms, and I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace.